Arizona News Radio. Pinal County Sheriff's Office shuts down a drug stash house in Phoenix and arrests 5.
There were about 482 pounds of marijuana discovered in a truck that also had the people that were used to smuggle the drugs across the desert.
Customs and Border Protection officers at Nogales arrest a woman. 65 pounds of meth found hidden in her pickup truck.
Indeed, it was unique. 65 pounds worth? Boy, you're talking about a good chunk of money.
Maricopa County Attorney Bill Montgomery says no more charges in the Hamilton High School football hazing case. They don't have enough witnesses.
Without admissible evidence to corroborate the information for us to present to a jury and convince a jury of guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, there's nothing more we can do.
Officials in southern Arizona looking for another possible victim. Fox attacked at Soar National Park East outside of Tucson.
The fox bit a tire, grabbed onto the sticker of one of the 2 bicyclists, and then a third woman, not part of their party, approached, tried to spray it with a water bottle.
George Tanner, Arizona News.
It's time for your 1100 KFNX traffic report, brought to you by FEMA and the Ad Council. Taking a look out to Phoenix, we have an accident at State Route 51 southbound at Northern Ave, as well as the I-10 westbound at Loop 202, and a collision at Loop 101 westbound at 35th Ave. When danger is imminent, will you be prepared? Now many mobile devices can bring you critical information from local sources you trust. Learn more at ready.gov/alerts.
From the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center, as we head into the evening under cloudy skies, showers likely, overnight low 53. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers, high 65. Thursday night, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers, overnight low 50. I'm Scott Allen Fortney from the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center.
Currently, in downtown Phoenix, it's 60 degrees.
Next news in 30 minutes or when it breaks, here on Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX.
It's time for an upgrade. Get to the Nissan Now sales event for big President's Day savings on the technology of tomorrow, available now. Save big on our entire lineup, like the 2018 Rogue with ProPilot Assist that helps keep you centered in your lane. And Titan, backed by America's best bumper-to-bumper limited truck warranty. Hurry in to Nissan now and save on our most intelligent lineup ever. Exclusive President's Day offers end soon. Now, get up to $10,323 off MSRP on the 2017 Nissan Titan. Now as low as $19,257. Get to this can't-miss event now. Shop ChooseNissan.com and your local Nissan dealer today. For well-qualified buyers, starting MSRP $29,580. Savings includes $5,750 cash back, $2,000 bonus cash, $2,573 average dealer discount on select trim. Excludes tax, title, license. Dealer sets actual prices. Take from new dealer stock. ProPilot Assist available feature and can't prevent collisions. Always monitor traffic conditions. Keep both hands on steering wheel. See owner's manual or call 1-888-858-8319 for safety information, terms, and details on limited truck warranty information. Ends 2/28.
Live from the Midtown studios of KFNX, it's time for the Wellness Roundtable radio show, sponsored by Atrix.com. Now, here's your hosts, Dr. Spear and Dr. White.
Happy Wednesday. Welcome to the Wellness Roundtable radio show, here straight from Phoenix. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
Dave, I'm doing great. I'm excited for today's show.
I am too. So I want to welcome all of the people who are watching us on Facebook. And it's a little bit bittersweet today, Scott. And the sweetness is that we have an extended play show, which is going to run about 90 minutes. And the bitter part is that there's been a tremendous tragedy in Broward County in Florida where there was a school shooting. So I just wanted to let our audience know that we will be breaking for a press release if that happens to take place during our show. So my prayers and my thoughts go out to everybody in Broward County.
Yeah, in Parkland. I think that was in Parkland, Dave.
Yeah. So, okay. So, without further ado, and I don't think we need to kind of go through our current events segment because we do have a lot to talk about. I'd like to introduce our guests, and then get right to the main topic. What do you think?
I think that'll be great.
Okay. So, our first guest is Stuart Burton. He's a celebrity trainer, owner of Stuart Burton's Iron and Silk Fitness Training Center in Lower Manhattan, and is the creator of the Safe Method of Training. You can find out more about his facility and more about him at ironandsilkfitness.com. Our second guest is Jerry Brainham, who is a former bodybuilder and science editor of Muscle and Fitness magazine and a nutritional consultant to elite athletes. Currently, he is the editor-in-chief of the Applied Metabolic newsletter, which can be found at appliedmetabolics.com. And our third guest, we have a large group today, is Ming Chu, who is a former bodybuilding champion, currently a physical therapist in New York City, who specializes in soft tissue rehabilitation. And you can learn more about Ming at mingmethod.com. Welcome, everyone.
Hey, thank you.
Hello.
So we're really looking forward to this show because the main topic of the show is really busting common fitness workout myths, or fitness myths and workout myths, really. And, it's funny because when Scott and I came up with the idea for Wellness Roundtable, really the idea germinated out of this kind of Wild West mentality where people say something, you get enough people to sort of believe it, and then it becomes truth. Even though it hasn't really been authenticated, even though it hasn't really been studied, it just happens to be kind of when the court of public opinion kind of agrees with it, it happens to be true. So we picked 4 myths today that we really want to delve into pretty deep from each of your perspectives and really educate the audience as to what's really going on here, both from the perspective of training, the perspective of rehabilitation, myofascial release, and the perspective of nutrition as well. So let's get started. The first myth that we have that we'd like to discuss is that big muscles equal strong muscles. And as I know that, through my education, going through, different physiology courses and things of that nature, it was always a myth that was kind of perpetuated, that if your muscles are big, they're strong. So I'd like to talk to Stu first and just find out where does that come from and why is that true or why isn't it true?
Well, I think first of all, most people, if they see someone, a male looking at another male, the exercise that they would see, let's say on the body, the skeletal structure, the muscles, it signifies power. You see somebody with some more muscles, and you think, oh, this person is got to be stronger than I am. When in actuality, it's really not the truth. There are a couple of things that we have to go into to really understand that, there's leverage. Leverage plays a large role in strength, and also muscular development doesn't mean that you have a lot of power unless you're training with enough progressive resistance in order for those muscles to actually be strong. If you're predispositioned to, let's say, acquire muscle at a good rate and or to build muscle, using a light weight and pumping and getting a lot of blood into that area could attribute to more size, but not necessarily strength. And Jerry just did a study on this recently, and we found and we've discussed it before that you can build muscle without lifting heavy, but the problem is that you're not going to have a stronger muscle. Mm-hmm. Now, if you were a person that was, let's say, not into training, and you start to train and your muscle starts to grow, yeah, you're going to get some muscle growth. You're going to get some strength that's going to accompany that. But if you see someone down the street with like a 22-inch arm, a 19-inch arm, it doesn't necessarily mean that person is any stronger with someone that has a 17-inch arm or a 15-inch arm. Ligament, tendon, bone insertion, the ability to move weight, technique, all of those things have to be factored in.
And so,
Stu,
yeah.
Stu, isn't it true though that you take a the bigger cross-sectional area of a muscle can develop more force? In addition to the fact there is also absolute and relative strength.
Correct. And that's what I was going to talk about. Yeah.
Yeah, which are factors that I think need to be brought into that.
Absolutely, because as an athlete gets stronger, actually the strongest people on the planet are the smaller people. It's not the super heavyweights that you see. What Scott's talking about is relative and absolute strength. Relative
Correct.
strength, right, is let's say I start to lift, and if I'm lifting weight, let's say my own body weight, and it's the same Stewie, and I put on an extra 50 or 60 pounds, I could probably absolutely outlift that Stewie that has less body weight. I can lift more weight than him. So where he would lift, let's say, 50 pounds, I can lift 100 pounds. But but relative strength, going in now, you start to see that this person can actually outperform that person that is actually larger. So you can compare someone like a gymnast that's training. But if that gymnast starts to gain weight, he's putting on muscular size, even though he's staying lean, what's going to happen is his overall strength, it's going to decrease a little bit. He might be absolutely more strong, but relatively weaker. And
his body weight.
Right, correct. And this is something, that you see all the time. So if you look at some of the women, weightlifters, and you're looking at even some of the men that are putting up triple body weight, or double body weight, and if you look at what they're lifting in relationship to how much they weigh, they actually are stronger than a lot of super heavyweights that are coming in at 340 pounds, let's say, or, and that are lifting. If you look at it, you say, oh, wow, this guy's putting up 900 pounds. Yes, that's amazing for the human body to be doing things like that, but someone else coming in and putting up 600 pounds at 142 pound body weight, just to give you an idea,
wow.
Wow. That's a lot stronger.
Right, absolutely. It's a relative percentage based on the individual's weight.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. So from a nutrition standpoint, Jerry, I know that there's different ways, I guess, to build muscle. There's different types of muscle, right? There's muscle that's quality muscle and muscle that's kind of like, for lack of a better term, messy or low quality muscle. What kind of nutritional practice builds what kind of muscle?
Well, I'm not sure what you mean by messy muscle. You'd have to define.
That was that wasn't really the right term. But what I'm talking about is not really quality muscle. So just bigger, but not necessarily.
Okay, so in other words, you're talking about, for example, a person who years ago they had the common practice in bodybuilding of bulking up, where in between contests, bodybuilders would just shove food in their mouth to eat an excess amount of calories, and as they gained weight, their strength went up. And they did put muscle size on, but they also put some fat on.
Right.
So, they got bigger, but they didn't look that good because there was no muscular definition at all. I think that are you referring to something like that?
I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically that's the reason that practice fell out of favor, because it became obvious after a couple of years that, if you put on 40 pounds after a contest, that 40 pounds is not going to be muscle if it comes from constant eating, for example, high-calorie foods and overconsumption of calories. And when you do diet down to get in top shape, you're going to just lose a lot of body fat. And when it turns out you really haven't gained much size anyway. So now the practice is of the current practice of competitive bodybuilders is to put on, you can't stay at a 5 or 3, let's say 4 or 5, 6% body fat all year. It's very bad for your health.
No way.
It's very bad, hard on the nervous system.
Sure.
Nobody can do it. So what happens is the bodybuilders relax the diets after the contest, and they gain some weight, but they never let themselves get to the point where they're virtually obese. In fact, there's a term that's used now called reverse dieting. And what this refers to is, most of the bodybuilders, of course, it varies with individuals as far as the specific diets they use. Some guys or women like low-carb diets. Others like low-fat, higher-carb diets. The commonality, of course, is a reduction in total caloric intake with an increased activity. That's how you lose the body fat. But what they do now is after the contest ends, instead of just shoving food down their mouth like they used to do in the past, what they do now is gradually add calories in a very gradual fashion, and this allows them to, let's say, recover from the stringent contest dieting, but it allows the body to get used to the additional calories so that the fat gain is minimal. And again, the term for this is reverse dieting. And to put it simply, it allows your metabolism to adjust, because I just wrote a couple of articles about what happens to bodybuilders and fitness athletes who diet strictly. They all show deficits or lowered resting metabolic rates. So obviously, if you have a lowered metabolic rate right after a contest and you start shoveling food, you're almost guaranteed to put fat on. But by doing this kind of reverse dieting type of situation, by gradually adding the calories, let's say every 2 days, it depends on the individual, you're allowing your metabolism to adjust to those additional calories, so your metabolism gradually rises, so the fat gain is minimal. And again, you don't lose any muscle, you maintain quality muscle. That's the most sensible way to do it now.
That's actually really smart. Yeah. Yeah. Scott.
Dave, I think I think the key point that he's really just defining is that size and girth doesn't equal strength.
Right.
Because there can be many of the factors that can be the variables in size, but it doesn't translate into strength.
Right.
Well, I could, is that me who just said that?
No, that was Scott.
No, that was Scott, Jerry.
Oh, Scott. Okay, Scott. Well, let me give you 2 quick examples to underscore what you just said. As scientists, I'm sure you're aware, when a person begins weight training, for the first 2 or 3 months, no matter what the sex, well, although this varies a little bit with women, usually the gains come mainly in strength rather than muscle size. In other words, strength comes first, followed by muscle size. Why is this? Because what happens is when you first start working out, you kind of fine-tune your neuromuscular connections between the brain and the muscle, and this tighter neuromuscular response allows you to contract the muscles harder, and, you get stronger. But, the size... the size follows the strength. So in other words, the strength and the size gains are not necessarily at the same time. So that's one example. The second example I'd give is my personal experience, and the other guys I'm sure know, have seen this too, is that you see a lot of these top competitive bodybuilders, the pro bodybuilders. I've interviewed countless, when I worked for the magazines, I lost count. I could hundreds of them. And I've seen them train. I trained with them. I trained with Arnold Schwarzenegger. The weights they use don't match their muscle size. In other words, you would expect a guy with a 22-inch arm or a 21-inch arm to be like doing barbell curls with 200 pounds. But the truth is, when I trained arms with Arnold Schwarzenegger, I'm not going to deny his arms were a lot bigger than mine, but on an exercise called preacher bench, Arnold could only use 100 pounds. I was using 125, which really annoyed the hell out of him because his arms were twice as big as mine. But I actually had more bicep strength than he did. And, so that's just an example, just underscoring the fact that large muscles do not necessarily equate to having a great amount of strength.
Got it.
Right.
Excellent.
So, I'd like to actually just say something about that too. With what Jerry's talking about, a lot of times you'll see guys that when they back off on weight and they pay a little bit more attention to technique and form, you'll notice that they get better size, better growth, and female. A lot of times, just moving the weight, you're not moving the weight properly. And again, like leverage systems, technique, these things, you can't overlook it, especially when you're trying to maximize whatever it is you're trying to be. You don't even have to be trying to be Mr. Olympia. You can just want to try and look good to go to the beach or look good just for yourself. But there comes a point in the time where you have to start to really look very closely at technique and start to understand, how you want to move that weight in order to activate those fibers properly.
I think that's an excellent point. And I think that goes to the point of, that if you move correctly, your performance in anything that is athletic or that is physical will be improved. So it is all about the movement. And so that kind of segues us up into, talking a little bit more about the rehabilitation, or maybe what you see as a physical therapist, Ming. Do you see, I'm assuming you see people who are, from various backgrounds in terms of their training and their nutrition, and maybe you see certain quality muscle. Do you see like certain injuries that relate to people who have poor quality muscle or don't train properly?
This is Ming Chu speaking here, the physical therapist. Yeah, I do see things. The most prevalent thing that I see, particularly with people who are working out a lot, is they have an unbelievable amount of tight tissue, adhesions, densified tissue, which really impairs their strength. They can actually be pretty big and muscular, but you can see that they can have problems. I had a patient that came in the other day. He was a pretty muscular fella, a small guy. He wasn't that tall, but he was very thick and muscular for his size. But he basically hurt his arm. He can barely curl like a 10-pound dumbbell. And as far as the rehab of that was concerned, it was actually an easy way to cure that, because all I had to do was trail down the problem that stemmed from his neck all the way down to his biceps. So basically what I'm saying is that if a person wants to get big and strong muscles, you really have to make sure that you have high fascial integrity. That's a word I made up. And you also have to have the muscles fire properly based on the quality of the nervous system as well. And fortunately for us, at least for me, the nervous system is also directly correlated to the quality of your fascia. So if you have tight, adhesed fascia, it chokes down on the nerves. Let's say for the biceps, in his case, C5 and C6 gets choked down at the nerve root. And if you traverse it all the way down to the brachial plexus, all the way down into the musculocutaneous nerve, which is the nerve that supplies the muscle of the bicep itself. And if you release all of these things, his arm literally, there's no exaggeration, improved by around 70% in terms of his strength within one treatment. So that's a case where a guy was actually injured where he can barely, curl 5 pounds, and all of a sudden he was like curling 25-pound, 30-pound dumbbells at no problem after the treatment. So in that sense, big muscles can still theoretically be very weak if it's not properly worked upon. Like if you have these faulty tissues and faulty nerves, it just simply won't work well. So, but all things being equal, getting back to a regular population, I always tell my patients, you can never have too much muscle, you can never have too much money, you can never be too good looking. So I say that all things being equal, building a little bit of muscle is a good thing for the average person.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Ming, to echo what you're saying, I was just talking to somebody recently explaining to them something similar to what you were just saying, that, not only hands-on therapy, but from a PT's point of view, as you are, releasing that tissue and making sure the joint can go through a full range of motion can really improve somebody's strength and neurological function.
Instantaneously.
And, I don't think people realize that, it's just as important to go to your trainer as it is important to go to your therapist. Because if you're moving right, you're going to facilitate greater growth in your muscle all over the body, male and female.
So let's take that point for a second. So I'm somebody who, let's say, is starting, I'm looking to work out. I want to, I'm a young guy. I want to get in shape. How do I know that I have good fascial integrity? How do I test that?
Very simple. What you do is you put them through, I have a screening that I do when a person comes into my office. I usually do a 90-minute session, which is very unusual for physical therapy sessions. Most PT clinics do, 20, 30-minute sessions, and maybe the initial session they'll do like 40 minutes. But my initial session is 90 minutes long, and it takes 30 minutes just to talk to the person and also do an evaluation. And basically what I do is I ask the person where your pain is, what your issues are, and then I do a manual muscle test on every single muscle. I do it quickly, though. It just takes a few minutes. And you figure out kind of quickly where the restrictions are. And when you do range of motion testing on top of that, you get a pretty good picture based on what they tell you and what you find exactly where the problems are. And once you find the problems, it's actually fairly simple. You just simply release the entire kinetic chain from top to bottom, and usually within 1 to 4 sessions, you can cure almost any problem. And I certainly recommend that young trainees or people who are getting back into the gym for the first time, they think that, jumping into a routine right away is the way to get in shape. You see this happen, with people who have resolutions. They go into the gym without any preparatory work. I strongly believe before you even get your butt into the gym, you have to be fully hydrated properly. Then you have to get your fascial integrity up to par, meaning getting the tissue worked on, even before you visit your personal trainer. So that's what I would advise people who are trying to get back in shape, or first-time people that are trying to get into the gym to get in shape for the first time.
Right.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just to touch on that a little bit, personally myself and what we do with our clients at Iron and Silk, we want to make sure that when they come inside, we're letting them know the prep is, hydration. We're, based off of individual sizes, we're telling them they need to take in X amount of water just to make sure, telling them how to consume that water, not consuming it in large amounts, because then a lot of times they come in dehydrated. That they want to, you want to drink, small amounts throughout the day. Getting a profile of nutritionally what's going on. I can't say it enough. The reason why, Iron and Silk thrives is because it's program based. You can't just come in and think you're going to lift weights. And I'm a bodybuilder, and I competed with the NPC and the IFBB, and, it's something that's dear to me. But we also have to look at the majority of people that are coming in, they're very misinformed. and they don't have a lot of years of experience behind the training. They just think because they can move, they want to get in and move. I say move correctly, and make sure that you're doing the right things around the table. So, hydration, again, like what Ming was saying, super important. You have to have flexibility and pliability to the fibers. Right. And this is something, again, that we stress immensely. You're not going to go in and push the body hard and not only, think that you're going to lift weights. Same thing with a yoga instructor coming in and doing yoga. I do a lot of rehab with people that are coming in, yoga instructors, because we get a lot of range of motion. But then there's no power with the range of motion that they can get moving back into a position, or a fighter, coming from a posted up position and then coming out of that position and being relaxed. A lot of these things you have to be able to understand that it works best when it's implemented in a system setting. There's got to be some of that.
Yep.
Let me chime in right here. This is Ming again. I have a very simple rule. There's a lot of formulas that are out there to address people's hydration issues, but I have a very simple rule. 2 liters is the starting point for everyone. 2 liters is basically, 2 quarts or, 8 glasses, however you want to put it. But 2 liters of water is the starting point for most people. Let's say you're an average male that weighs 175 pounds, and, 2 liters is a good starting point. If you work out 3-4 days a week, I suggest you drink a little bit more than 2 liters of water a day. It could be like 2.25, 2.5 liters of water. If you're big, like Stuart or like Jerry, they're big dudes, they're big fellas that weigh over 230, 240. You can go as high as 3 liters of water a day. If you're a smaller female, you can go as little as 1.7 liters of water a day. I recommend pure, filtered water.
We'll be right back. We're finishing our first segment. Stay with us.
News you won't get anywhere else. Independent Talk 1100 KFNX. Fair and balanced. Independent Talk 1100 KFNX.
Special report, Florida high school shooting.
This is a terrible day for Parkland, Broward County, the state of Florida, and the United States.
Broward County Sheriff Scott Israel on the tragedy that has shaken Parkland, Florida, where gunfire erupted at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School north of Miami. Correspondent Brian Todd reports at least 14 people were taken to area hospitals.
Now, the father of one student says his daughter told him there was, quote, blood all over the place in the wake of this shooting. Law enforcement sources telling CNN there are at least 2 fatalities.
Teacher Melissa Felkowski says she and 19 students took shelter in a closet for an emotional 40 minutes.
They're holding it together, it was a little bit more stressful and harder, when we were in the closet and, they were crying and panicking. And
authorities say the shooter is in custody and had attended the school at one time. The circumstances at this hour are not known. I'm Barbara Cusack.
From the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center, as we head into the evening under cloudy skies, showers likely, overnight low 53. Tomorrow, mostly cloudy with a chance of showers, high 65. Thursday night, mostly cloudy, a chance of showers, overnight low 50. I'm Scott Allen Fortney from the KFNX WeatherBug Weather Center.
Currently, in downtown Phoenix, it's 58 degrees.
Next news in 30 minutes or when it breaks. Here on Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX.
Atrix is one of the fastest growing companies in the footwear industry and is widely recognized as a global leader in comfort and wellness footwear products. The Atrix mission is to create the healthiest shoe on the market today with fashion, function, and quality at the forefront. Atrix designs and manufactures most types of footwear for both men and women. All styles are crafted with care to meet the highest standards in design, incorporate cutting-edge technologies, and offer unmatched customization and adjustability. To learn how Atrix can help you with your feet, go to AETREX.com. That's Atrix.com.
Calling all voters in Surprise, Sun City, Peoria, Litchfield Park, New River, and Waddell. You live in District 8. The Northwest Valley League of Women Voters wants to remind you to get out and vote in your special primary election to fill the seat vacated by Trent Franks. Primary election day is Tuesday, February 27th. Bring a photo ID or 2 other forms of ID. For more info, visit maricopa.vote. That's maricopa.vote.
The Renaissance Festival is back! Huzzah! Weekends now through April 1st.
You love the Renaissance
Renaissance Festival.
Great shopping, a giant crafts market.
Welcome to the Renaissance Festival.
New shows, non-stop feasting. The Renaissance Festival is back. Weekends now through April 1st. Get great savings with coupons at participating Wendy's, Cobblestone Auto Spa, and Hall of Frames while supplies last. Don't miss the Renaissance Festival.
Celebrating 30 years of cheers.
Do you suffer from foot pain? Let Atrex help alleviate some of that pain with a pair of Atrex orthotics. Millions of pairs have been sold to those in need of fast relief from foot pain. Atrex offers a wide selection of orthotics designed for each arch type and footwear style. Visit Atrex.com. That's AETREX.com and get your pair today. Again, that's AETREX.com.
Don't we all have questions about our health, fitness, or even injuries? Now there's a place to go, and it's online at wellnessroundtable.com. Wellnessroundtable.com is an online interactive video platform that allows the best experts in the world to share their knowledge with you. Through creating a roundtable or attending a lecture, you are bound to realize the value of having evidence-based information live and in the comfort of your own home. Check them out at wellnessroundtable.com and get some real answers. Use the promo code 1100 to get a 20% discount.
Welcome back to the Wellness Roundtable Radio Show. We are here busting some fitness and workout myths, and we're speaking with the pros, Stuart Burton, Jerry Brainham, and Ming Chu. And Ming, I just want to kind of apologize. I kind of cut you off because we broke from our first segment, but you were talking about hydration, and you were making some very, very specific recommendations. So
Sure. Basically, before I even treat my patients, as I think most trainers should do with their clients, the client should be, or the patient should be hydrated before they even come into the office or to the gym. And I have a very, very simple rule to keep it as simple as possible so people can actually follow it. I always tell people to start off with 2 liters. Mm-hmm. Even if you're a female, you drink 2 liters of filtered water, pure water. I'm not talking about bubbly water or vitamin water or juices. I'm talking about pure water. And that water should be had on an empty stomach. It is believed, in Europe at least, Dr. Guy Voyer would say that if you drank water on an empty stomach, it goes into the extracellular space, which is the space where the connective tissue lives, and that you want to hydrate all the connective tissue before you start training. So 2 liters is where I would start. If you're as large and as massive as Stuart and Jerry over here, you can go up to 2.5 or even 3 liters of water. I weigh about 202 pounds personally, and I work out about 4 times a week. I drink between 2 to 3 liters of purified water every day, and I always drink it on an empty stomach. And that's a very simple rule to follow. I recommend everyone do it.
2 questions for you. So you work out in the morning, 5:30. When do you start hydrating? In other words,
I wake up. I literally drink. I'm a little of a strange bird, but this is how I do it. I drink a full liter of water even before I leave and before I have breakfast. I usually wake up early in the morning. I'll drink 2 cups of water. I'll wait a few minutes, and I'll drink another 2 cups of water, and I'll wait another 15, 20 minutes, then I'll have my breakfast. I always drink my water, particularly before a meal. I usually love drinking water at least 15 to 20 minutes before a meal because it does not interfere with the enzymes when your body's trying to digest, so you just push the water through. And I already got my 1 liter out the way. So for the next few hours, the next 16 hours that I'm awake, I try to get another 1 to 2 liters after that. Usually on days that I train, I tend to drink more, and usually on days that I don't train, I tend to drink a little less.
Okay. So, I mean, that was fantastic. I mean, just really talking about in-depth quality muscle, how we achieve quality muscle, the nutrition necessary for quality muscle, and the importance of really hydrating fascia and really kind of almost kind of a pre-workout kind of routine. So now what I'd like to discuss is something that's a little bit more near and dear to me because I have something known as flat butt. And I'm wondering, that was a joke, I'm wondering if are squats the best exercise for glutes? are, because again, you have to squat, what are other ways of getting there? And Jerry, if you can talk about, what is the proper nutrition for something, not specifically for squats, but for weightlifting?
Well, I actually couldn't. If you asked me the specifics to build a buttocks,
right?
No such animal.
That's not going to happen, right?
Right. I mean, I can't give you like a buttock building diet. I mean, that's you might find that on the internet, but it doesn't exist.
Well, you could
bottle reality.
it. You could bottle it and become a billionaire.
It probably does exist on the internet.
Right, it does. So, Jerry, so go ahead.
Well, by the way, I'm also a victim of the flat butt syndrome, and when I was a bodybuilder, I had, pretty good glutes. But, at my age, to be honest with you, I mean, even though I continue to work out, I do see signs of sarcopenia, which is, of course, for the people that don't know what that means, it's a loss of lean mass with age. And the first place I noticed it, strangely enough, was in my glutes. My glutes have dissipated to such an extent that when I sit too long, it's like sitting on bone. So I feel your pain, in other words.
Okay.
Jerry, I'm Asian, right? You know what they say about Asian men and Asian women, right? We have flat legs.
Oh, so are you in that category too, then? Huh?
You know what? Actually, I was a great squatter when I was younger, and I've maintained a certain amount of gluteal development, and I do get people, some women will tease me, say, "Hey, you have a perky butt for an Asian." I hear that all the time.
Yeah.
So I do hear your plight, though. I do hear that.
Right.
No. I'm really serious about this issue of sarcopenia. It's a very serious problem because as you age, as you know, testosterone, growth hormone, and getting older, it just the enzyme production goes down, so the bodily systems can't maintain that mass as well as it used to. So I hear your plight.
Ask me the question again.
The question is really, we're not just talking about. I mean, we're talking about glutes and we're talking about squats, but from a nutritional standpoint, what would you say is the optimal sort of nutritional program for someone who's exercising and wants to gain mass, wants to build muscle?
Well, the first thing you have to understand is that there's no set diet for everybody. There's no one size fits all. You have to take into account individual food sensitivities, food likes and dislikes. This is a problem I have with registered dietitians who often give out these printed diets, where the meals are all there's no leeway. They're all set there on paper, and half the time people won't follow this diet. So you have to take that into account. And for example, some people will thrive on low carbohydrate diets, as I said earlier. Some people will thrive on, let's say, lower fat, higher carbohydrate diets. But generally speaking, if you want to build muscle, you obviously have to keep the protein high. I mean, you also, and the protein, that's universal. Anybody who wants to put muscle mass on, whether it's the butt or anywhere else, you're going to have to eat. I think one of the third question that we're going to discuss today, I can go into more specifics about this. But let's say for now, protein has to be the key nutrient for building muscle. Okay. Now, the other two macronutrients, which is, of course, carbohydrate and fat, that's more adjustable. Now, just to use myself as an example, now, I realize that one person it constitutes anecdotal evidence. It's not really scientific. But even back in my bodybuilding days, I've never been able to tolerate much carbohydrate. In other words, all over the internet, a lot of these guys on the professional forums, they have advanced degrees. They make fun of people like Gary Taubes and the other low carb advocates, because they think that this insulin theory of fat, those insulin tends to stimulate fat. They think it's nonsensical, and they say a calorie is a calorie is a calorie. No matter what type of diet you use, the bottom line is unless you reduce calories, you're not going to lose body fat. I disagree with that completely, and I use myself. I will argue that vehemently. I don't care what the textbook. One guy quoted a biochemistry textbook, and you guys probably have read this, where de novo lipogenesis, in other words, the production of fat in the body from carbohydrate, is extremely low. In other words, if you take that one step further, they're saying it's almost impossible to get fat from eating carbohydrate, which is so laughable to me. That's ridiculous. Because I can tell you that when I compete in contests, I tried every diet known to mankind, from low fat to high fat this and that, low carb. The only thing that ever consistently worked was low carbohydrate diets.
Right.
But in relation to building muscle, that's what we're talking about here now, right? Rather than losing fat, we're talking about building muscle, right?
Yep.
In that situation, you have to, again, make sure your protein intake is high. But believe it or not, this is a time not to reduce calories too much, because if you reduce calories, it actually blunts putting size in. You don't want to overeat where you start to put body fat on, but it's actually favorable to gaining muscle size to actually increase the calories. And the increase in calories is going to come mainly from carbohydrate and fat. Now, you have to be careful there, because you have to understand most people don't get fat. It's true. Most people don't. If they consume only carbohydrates alone, you can consume a pretty good amount of carbohydrates. It's true, before you start to gain body fat. In other words, you basically have to, once your glycogen stores in your body, in your liver and your muscles, once they're filled and you eat an excess of carbohydrate, the carbohydrates have nowhere to go. They turn into palmitic acid. It becomes fat. But the point being that, if you have, on the other hand, let's say you reduce your carbohydrates, then you can have a lot more fat. But here's my point. Most people who are obese today, and I'm not talking about body, I'm just with people on the street.
Sure.
You'll find if you check their diets, nobody gets fat from eating protein. That's a huge myth. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. But if you eat a large amount of carbohydrate and a large amount of dietary fat, particularly saturated fat, not the good fats like polyunsaturated fat like omega-3 and extra virgin olive oil, omega-9. In other words, if you eat a combination of high fat and high carb, you're going to gain body fat. So it's a delicate balancing act. So to put on muscle, you got to keep your protein intake high. Yeah. What I've been recommending for the last, believe it or not, 40 years, and I was very happy to see that my ideas were actually confirmed by science very recently, which I'll talk about that later. But I've always told guys who want to put on muscle, if you want to put on muscle, aim for 1 gram per pound of body weight. Okay. That's about 2.2 grams per kilogram of body weight. Sure. And in other words, the body weight goal is what you want to weigh. In other words, if let's say you're 150 now and you want to weigh 200, you want to aim for let's say 200 grams of protein. Now here again, I have a problem with some of the experts in the field. I should get into that more later, but let me put it this way. The amount of protein they recommend per meal, it's almost impossible to get 200 grams of protein. Right. So they're saying that this amount, but see what they're talking about is purely muscle protein synthesis, but there's other factors involved in gaining muscle besides muscle protein synthesis, and it gets confusing for the average person. You have to differentiate, see? In other words, they're giving set figures of let's say 30 grams of protein per meal. Right. And they're saying to eat, let's say 5 meals a day, and that's not enough really to put on a lot of muscle mass. You're going to have to eat a little more than that. Right. But that's enough to cover muscle protein synthesis, but you're not going to really gain maximum muscle mass with that amount of protein. So to answer the question succinctly, I would say to keep your protein high, again, about 1 gram per pound of body weight for whatever body weight you want to weigh. And you're going to have to experiment because, again, it's an individual thing. Some people tolerate color. 75% of the population is insulin insensitive. In other words, they're basically pre-diabetic, and most of these people don't even know it. They're walking around with fatty liver. They have no idea. And the thing is, when they eat carbohydrates, they're going to have a problem. The other 25% who are not insulin insensitive can eat a fairly large amount of carbohydrates with no problem whatsoever. And as far as the fat, again, it depends on how much carbohydrates you eat. The less carbohydrates you consume, the greater amount of fat you can take in. And by the way, even though saturated fat is associated with body fat, and the old thing about heart disease, very few people know that there's only 2 types of fat that increase testosterone or maintain testosterone levels in the body. Right. One is saturated fat, and the other one is monounsaturated fat. It's found in extra virgin olive oil and nuts. The polyunsaturated fat in vegetable oils and fish oil, that doesn't help testosterone. Only those 2 types of fat. But I still think that you want to keep a limit on the saturated fat. I wouldn't consume more than 15%, maybe 20% at most when you're trying to gain some size. You want to concentrate on the let's say monounsaturated fat because it's more readily oxidized, less chance of becoming body fat.
Okay, excellent. So Stu, with all of that information, then what are some of the recommendations of training to, and again, the flat butt thing, but what are some of the recommendations that are alternative to squats? Let's say I can't do squats. What else can I do?
Well, first of all, I have to add that I'm from Central America, so I don't have the flat butt syndrome. My butt's good, and I've never had a problem with it. But a couple of things. I wanted to say, first of all, Jerry is like dead on, and just real quick, just to touch on that before I jump into it, is I think we're talking about keeping the body anabolic. So as you're putting foods into the body through that gastrointestinal tract, digestion is going to be the key thing that's going to allow you to facilitate all of this growth. That's going to allow everything to come through. So getting to an exercise, a lot of people I see a lot of people doing like hip extensions, and the way they're doing it is they're across the bench, so their upper backs are resting, their hips are dropping way below the bench, and they're thrusting up. And while this is a very good exercise, it's actually very limited in how you can truly activate the glute. I'm a big believer in pre-exhaust. I think pre-exhaust is very safe, probably the safest way to activate fiber. A lot of reasons people can't, they don't get the type of development they want. It's because they don't really know how to contract, flex, and utilize the muscles they're trying to activate. But when you pre-exhaust the muscle, you do it an isolation movement first, and then you move on to something that is compound movement, and you get this level of synergism, activation going on. It builds better muscle. It saves the joint and allows you to tap in on a neurological level that's superior. So what I would suggest is lengthwise lying on the bench, just like if you were going to do a bench press, and take a dumbbell, put the dumbbell across the hips. You're going to get a little acupressure, which you're going to get some. If that dumbbell is heavy for most of us guys and some of us girls, it's going to push against that hip flexor. It's going to start to open up that area a little bit. As you thrust up through your heels, you're going to notice the range of motion is extremely short. It's not big. I'd suggest holding for contraction about 5 seconds and do a set that we would call accumulative reps. So it would be a contraction up at the top with a 5-second pause. Then you do 2 repetitions with a 5-second pause at the top, 3 repetitions with a 5-second pause at the top, 4, and so forth until we get to 10.
I see. Okay.
After that, my move would not be the squat. If it's glute development that you're after, I would move to what's called a Bulgarian squat, which I think is superior to squatting. Your rear leg is going to be elevated. We do this freehand, which means with just body weight, and sometimes we'll do it in the Jones machine in my gym, where you're locked in, so there's less chance of you having to worry about balance. And what we're looking for now is depth with the right lean through the torso. I remember being every time I go to LA, I might hit a party or something, and somebody's telling me, the conversation always goes to glutes, and people are talking about, the women are talking about lunges. And they'll show me what they're doing, and I'm looking at them, and they're lunging with the torso totally vertical, the knees at a 90-degree angle. You can't hit your glutes with that angle. You're not going to work it maximally. Once you start to reduce the hip movement, and that hip stays in line with the torso, you're starting to go into what would be considered something like a front squat. A hack squat and sissy squat, where the hip is now in front, in line with the torso in front. That puts all the stimulation into the quadricep. Lunges and Bulgarian squats, you want to be demonstrated like an acceleration movement where there's a little bit more of a forward lean. Now, I'm not saying excessive for people out there that are listening and think that, I got to lean all the way forward so that my chest touches my thigh. No. But you have to have enough of a forward lean so that when you drive, you're distributing the weight through the heel. That's going to activate the glute. But if you're pushing through the heel and your torso is totally vertical and you're dropping straight down vertically, you're working more quad, my friend. You're not going to get as much glute. You're not going to get as much glute.
It's great.
So,
great.
Can I just jump in here?
Yeah,
real fast?
and then we're going to take a call. Go ahead, Jerry.
Okay, I have to comment on the hip extension exercise that Stu was just describing. Not the one he did, not the one with the dumbbell, the first one where you lie crossways across the bench
Yeah.
with a barbell over your hips.
Sure.
I actually wrote an article on that specific exercise for my Applied Metabolics newsletter because I came across a study of a man who was doing that exercise. I think that exercise is derived from what they call cross fitness. I think it was developed in that type of situation. But what this guy did is he put a 250-pound barbell across his hips, and he basically crushed one of his nerves in his leg to the point where his leg was paralyzed. So,
Right.
in other words, you got to use some common sense.
Absolutely.
That exercise is not, and I think Stu would agree with me, it's not meant for heavyweight.
Right,
It's idiotic.
No,
to put a 250-pound barbell where you're depressing the nerve and cutting off your nerve force, where the guy had to be dragged out of the gym. I mean, that is what I called, and I wrote an article to warn people about that, because I see people doing that exercise all the time. Personally, my personal feeling, I think it's a crap exercise. As Stu pointed out, there's dozens of exercises that will develop the gluteus. Why would you do one that can cause nerve damage? It's idiotic.
Right,
It makes no sense to me.
You have to look
Are
at
you
movement.
talking about like a bridge with a barbell across your hips? Is that the exercise?
Yes. It's very popular today, yeah.
But 250 pounds is a little.
Yeah, 250 pounds. You're not getting enough support. The bar is too small, and what happens is it digs in too much. You need something that's either flat or something that's padded in order to get the right type of, feel.
You're absolutely right.
You're just
started from the jiu-jitsu guys. The jiu-jitsu guys that were always, and wrestling, that were always in the mount position. They need to bridge up and get the opponent off of them.
Right.
And like you said, CrossFit took that and adopted that. But yes, now I know what you mean.
Hey, Jerry, I have a new article for you to write. You know what's going to be the title of it?
What's that?
Barbell crushes dumbbell.
So, guys, what we're going to do, we're actually coming up to finishing our second segment, but we're going to take a call from Jesse in New York City. Hey, Jesse.
Yes.
Hi, you're on with the pros, and we're talking about busting some common fitness and workout myths. What's your question?
First of all, I just wanted to say that Stu, I know Stu for a long time. Stu is an excellent trainer, and but I just had one question about diet.
Sure.
A lot of bodybuilders, they eat a lot of food, 5 meals a day, taking in the calories and stuff like that. I'm a martial artist, so I'm trying to get some tips on eating for a martial arts type of physique or workout.
Okay.
So, with general health, you have to eliminate the food that you eat. So if you're eating 5 meals a day and you're not eliminating 5 meals a day, how do you deal with that? A lot of people say maybe you should only eat 1 meal a day. What's your take on that?
Okay. Thanks for the question.
Jerry, you want to jump on that? Let Jerry jump on
Sure,
that.
I can jump on that.
Go ahead, Jerry.
First of all, this notion of having to eat small meals more often, that has been a kind of axiom in dieting or for many, many years.
Yes.
However, they've shown that it's kind of a myth. You want to have regular meals, don't get me wrong, but the notion of I've known bodybuilders, Stu, I'm sure Ming, we've heard of bodybuilders eating as much as 8 to 12 meals a day. And, all right, there's small meals, but it's kind of overkill. It's just not necessary to do that. And very few people have the time to do that. Now, in relation to martial arts, you have to look at the sport itself. It's brief periods of high intensity movement coupled with brief rest between rounds. I know this because I worked with a lot of elite professional boxers in the 90s. I was their nutrition. So the diets that I designed for these boxers would be very similar to what an MMA athlete would use. And what I would suggest is, again, a focus on protein. But here again, this is a different situation. Because of the high intensity activity, you want to time the carbohydrates.
Right.
In other words, I would say, for example, before exercise, before, let's say, practice or sparring, you want to have a good carbohydrate meal about 3 hours before, to give the carbohydrates time to digest. And, before a match, if you're going to actually have a match, I would say about 30 minutes to have a quick-acting carbohydrate drink, which will bring up your blood glucose and allow maximum muscular activity. So those are so it's basically, and you can get into supplements. It gets a little complex, and coincidentally, again, I have to mention, I've collected a ton of research on nutrition for mixed martial artists, and I plan to write an article on this in my Applied Metabolic newsletter, including the major problem of mixed martial artists. And this is kind of controversial. A lot of these guys, to make weight, dehydrate themselves.
Oh, God.
And they get really messed up.
Course,
they get sick.
Yeah.
And I'm going to talk about ways to avoid that, because I have a good record with that. All the fighters I work with, which is about 20 boxers, none of them ever failed to make weight, not one single time. Right. And after the fight, when they wanted to gain weight, had a 24-hour interval between the weigh-in and the actual fight. My record of putting weight on in one day was with a fighter named Oscar De La Hoya, who wanted to put on 16 pounds in 24 hours, and I did it. And that's with no bloat, no stomach sticking out. He knocked the crap out of the guy. He wanted to gain a lot of weight because his opponent was Cesar Chavez, who we had a little grudge against at the time. He wanted to bust up his face. And he felt that if he was heavier, he would do that. But the other major issue with MMA is, of course, the head trauma. And there's ways of that's a big thing in football, of course, too.
Jerry,
the head trauma, and I believe.
Jerry,
I've also.
I'm just going to pause for a moment. We're just going to break, and when we come back, let's continue with that thought. Okay. All right, we'll be right back with the Wellness Roundtable radio show, speaking to the pros and busting common fitness and workout myths.
Matrix is one of the fastest growing companies in the footwear industry and is widely recognized as a global leader in comfort and wellness footwear products. The Atrix mission is to create the healthiest shoe on the market today with fashion, function, and quality at the forefront. Atrix designs and manufactures most types of footwear for both men and women. All styles are crafted with care to meet the highest standards in design, incorporate cutting-edge technologies, and offer unmatched customization and adjustability. To learn how Atrix can help you with your feet, go to AETREX.com. That's Atrix.com.
If you missed the Lars Larson show, you missed this.
And they will always cut a break for the liberal candidates for political office. So we have to be aware of that as citizens. If we had the kind of media we ought to have, we'd have half the reporters telling one version of the story, the other half telling the other version. You'd watch both versions, and the truth would lie somewhere in the middle. But instead, what we get is all left-wing version.
Lars Larson, After Dark, nights 10 p.m. to midnight. Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX. You're listening to Independent Talk, 1100 KFNX, Cave Creek, Phoenix, a division of Premier Radio Stations, the home of the Savage Nation.